RESPECT. Tell them what it means to me. It's about respect on this edition of Mic'd Up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now, and all throughout the Now family of networks. I think that's close to the lyrics of that song. But Pat Narduzzi probably would have the answer to that, because Pat Narduzzi, the head coach of the Pitt football team, feels his team deserves more respect. We're going to get into whether or not Pitt does deserve more respect. Obviously, a team on the fringe of being ranked, likely would be ranked without the Western Michigan loss, but is that just a mulligan, and does Pitt deserve more respect overall for what they've done? And then, of course, another victory certainly feels like they really got the Coastal on lock. And we're also going to get into Pitt's quarterback, because why they maybe deserve more respect is because of Kenny Pickett, who is the only member of Pitt that has been great all year, even including the Western Michigan game. And if he actually deserves more respect nationally as well, to the level of being a Heisman candidate. We also will get into, at the end of this thing, the West Virginia Mountaineers, the exact opposite. They don't deserve much respect right now, and why this season has completely gone all the way down the tubes, worse than even the strongest critic had thought entering the year, where the program maybe goes from here, and potentially at the end we'll touch on the Penguins. Just to let you know, if you're just waking up and you went to bed early, the Penguins did get a victory to open up their season last night. A lot of goals were scored. Some of those empty netters, as weird as that is, ESPN started off their NHL coverage. Some had some thoughts there. We'll get into those more on future shows probably. But will the Pens be able to keep this up without Crosby and Malkin? A lot more offensively than I would have thought without Crosby and Malkin. And when will it be an issue with Tristan Jarry still in net, since that was not corrected in the offseason? Mike, to get underway here, Pat Narduzzi, not shy about letting people know his feelings, but recently, now feeling like Pitt, even coming off a bye week, deserves more respect. This is a Pitt team that only has the one loss. It is to Western Michigan. It is a bad loss. I don't think he can even defend it, especially after coming off of the Tennessee win and what it could have meant if Pitt would have just continued to keep on winning. That was a game the defense collapsed. They do have a big win over Tennessee on the road. Tennessee is not who they used to be many, many years ago, but still a contending team, an SEC team, and that was on the road in a tough place to play. They do also have wins over UMass, New Hampshire, which no one's going to be able to brag too much about, even though Pitt did boat race those teams and was very impressive, so they did more than take care of business. They also got the victory over Georgia Tech, which is a conference foe, and a competitive conference foe that almost knocked off Clemson a week before Clemson did lose, even though Georgia Tech is not necessarily a contending or great team themselves. So to get things started, does Pitt deserve more respect nationally as a team? Should they already be ranked at 4-1? And what needs to happen for them to get there if they're not yet deserving of that respect?
I just wish sometimes Pat would. I think sometimes he gets in his own way. I get where he's coming from. However, this is a byproduct of not just this year, as you mentioned, losing. This is of years past. If Pitt had a reputation over the last few years of being in the top 25, and the voters were familiar with them and the program, and maybe they could look past that loss, they probably would be in the top 25. Right. But because they have no history of doing so, they're not going to get it until there's a very simple solution for them for getting in the top 20. I have no problem with them not being in. Could I make a case that they should be? Yeah, because I think some of the teams,
23rd, 24th.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of the teams are in there based on reputation, and I don't care who tells me, Coastal Carolina shouldn't be in the top. Well, we can get into that into a different show. They're not a top 25 team with that schedule. Right. Pat has a simple solution to earning the respect, and that's winning the next few weeks. If they win the next couple weeks, I guarantee you, if they win this week and they beat Clemson next week, Pitt will be in the top 25. That's pretty simple. I don't know what his reasoning out and saying that. Sometimes he just says things at press conferences that nobody's really sure why he says it. But
do you think
it's a dumb time to say it?
Yeah, do you think maybe he says it, and we know college coaches do this. They do it a lot in college basketball because they need to position themselves seeding in the tournament. There is a playoff now in college football, but still they want to do this to get in better bowl games, etc. Do you think he's doing it almost to politician Pitt to get ranked, to basically publicly tell the voters, I feel disrespected, so if Pitt goes out there and boat race the team, maybe instead of being 24th, like we're saying they should at least be at minimum, maybe a voter would slide them 21st because it's like, maybe I did screw Pitt last week. Okay, they had a mulligan in Western Michigan. Maybe he's politicking for a ranking. Is that possible?
Well, possibly, but my better guess would be that he's using the media, or he's using his platform on the media to just get to his team a little bit.
Could be. Yeah, true.
They've been off for 2 weeks. I don't know what their mindset is over there. I assume he hasn't pumped up knowing that, what's ahead.
Yeah.
It could be just a different source of motivation for them. Everyone thinks you're garbage. You're 4-1. You're not even getting any votes, blah, blah, blah.
That's a coach thing to do.
My guess would be that's where he's going with that, but he also knows. I think that's it, because I don't think he really believes what he's saying, because he knows what's ahead. As I said, if Pitt wins these next 2 games, they will be ranked. That they'll be a 6-1 team. They'll be in first place in a Power 5 conference. They'll be ranked. Everything's ahead of them. Everything they want to accomplish is still ahead of them, regardless of what happened against Western Michigan.
Yeah, and really, at the end of the day, unless you're talking about the top 4 spots, because obviously that matters for playoff, it doesn't really matter if you're ranked 24th or you're 26th or 7th outside the top 25. Yes, for recruiting and maybe even for his personal legacy and resume and the program, as you mentioned, it is better to be able to say to people, we're a top 25 team or a perennial top 25 team. As you mentioned, the benefit of the doubts that it do exist. It should be about each individual year, but we both know as adults here who are living in reality, it's not. If there is a body of work of a team, like Texas, for example, a perfect example of this. They have a body of work of a historic program that, they're not nearly what they were even when Vince Young was there, but they at least get in those top 25 rankings and then usually putter it away. So even though they're not that great of a team, they're not even that great this year, they end up sliding in there at 23rd, 24th. And maybe that's also unfair because they also get a bump because they're freaking Texas and what they bring as a brand. They'd rather have them 24th than not ranked. But that's just the reality that Pitt's living in. They're not going to get a bump that Texas would get as a bump. They're going to have to show it on the field. And I'm sure if you look at the schedule, the voters probably are saying to themselves, we're only really giving them credit for 2 wins because that's Tennessee and Georgia Tech. They're not going to get anyone's praise for New Hampshire and UMass, even though they did dominate those games. And the Western Michigan game, Mike, is not even just losing to a MAC team. This is Western Michigan that's lost other games. Yeah, they score a lot, but that's a bad loss no matter how way you slice it. So the way Pitt can rebound and get ranked is win. If they beat Virginia Tech, they're 100% guaranteed ranked. It doesn't even matter what they do. I'd imagine they're guaranteed ranked. If they then go and also beat Miami, who's vulnerable and had lost earlier in the year and has already had hiccups to Virginia, they're definitely going to be solid ranked. And if Pitt keeps this up, Mike, they could get in the top 15 for crying out loud. If that ends up being the issue. Now to pivot though, because why Pitt is in this position here at 4-1 and arguing to be ranked and saying they're disrespected, it's because of Kenny Pickett. Okay, 6 touchdown passes to tie a team record, even in the loss. He's jumping up the all-time Pitt statistics, moving ahead of Dan Marino. This is a guy who, if you look at just the stats alone, is having literally the best season in college football for a quarterback throughout the country. I'm not going to say he's the best quarterback overall in the country, maybe. Certainly, I don't know if the NFL would agree, but he has moved himself up a ladder. The NFL is looking at him. He has pro chances. He is one of the best quarterbacks in this country. He is taking advantage of this offense, and he has become a leader of this team. He is not in any way the problem. They may have 99 problems. Kenny Pickett is not one. But does he deserve more national respect? Should the program be promoting him more with videos and packages and social media posts? They're putting up his stats, but should it be a literal Heisman campaign? Because should he be a Heisman candidate? And is he getting that recognition? He's on some lists. Not enough. I've seen some national pundits put a top 5 out recently with him not on it. And if you look at the numbers, he does deserve it. But of course, he's coming at it off a Pitt program that hasn't been ranked in a while. The only year they were good with Narduzzi really was a Coastal Division championship that many thought they weren't really that good of a team and took advantage of a weak division. He is leading a team and a program that nationally may not get respect or get that benefit of the doubt that others get. And maybe New York and the Heisman Committee doesn't want a Pitt player there. They'd rather have players at major programs. Does Kenny Pickett deserve more respect?
I think he's getting, I think at this point of the season, we're still only halfway there. I think from where it was at the beginning of the season till now, I think he's making lists. I think he's getting talked about by, Matt Leinert's bringing him up.
He is. I love him.
There's guys that are this week. It's interesting. A guy that's calling the game, Andre Ware.
Right.
Won a Heisman at Houston. I'm sure that's going to come up. Yeah. I think he's getting enough talk. I think he's on enough. I think he's on enough thing. He is similar to what Pitt is. If Pitt runs the only chance I think of Kenny Pickett being a top 5 candidate or even somebody that gets invited to New York is if Pitt runs the table.
You got to run the table. They can't even stand a loss to Clemson. Okay.
Yeah, I think if Pitt runs the table, and obviously he would be a big part of it.
Right.
With the stats he's putting up. I said this 2 weeks ago, and I'll stay with it. Kenny Pickett's the best quarterback in college football this year. I'm not saying he has the best potential.
Right. By the numbers.
This year, if you're basing it on the field performance, leadership,
right,
what he's done against the opponents that are in front of him, there's not been a better quarterback in college football. So if you want to go by that, then he should be a Heisman candidate. If you want to put some other factors into it as far as brand, maybe he doesn't make it. But he's just like the Pitt. The Pitt is going to mirror Kenny Pickett. If they run the table and they play in the Coastal Champ or the ACC championship game, I think there's a good chance that Kenny Pickett's not going to win the Heisman Trophy. However, I think there's a chance. I think it would be a hell of a thing for Pitt if he's a guy that's on ESPN sitting there as one of the five candidates. I think that'd be a heck of a thing for Pat Narduzzi. Yeah, that'd be a pat on the back from Mark Whipple. And I think that's within reach. I wouldn't bet on it, but the way he's playing and the opponents that he's playing coming up, the good thing for Pitt is 3 of their next 4 games are on national TV.
Yeah, that is.
Yep. ESPN2 next Saturday. Wouldn't doubt it's either going to be on ESPN or ABC against Clemson. And then in 2 weeks, when they play North Carolina, it's Thursday night on ESPN.
Right.
So they're in the Miami game. It hasn't been announced yet, but you would think that there's a chance with the Miami brand and everything and Pickett.
Yeah.
I would think that there's a good chance that's
Miami's on national TV all the time.
That's what I mean. I think there's a chance that game's on one of the ESPN.
Right. ESPN2 or something.
So he's going to get plenty of chances to show his case across the country.
Right.
And like I said, Kenny Pickett, he's not going to win the Heisman, but I think his goal should be, or the programs. And I think it's a different thing now, Mike, than when Larry Fitzgerald was a Heisman candidate. They didn't have Twitter and all that. It's a different way that the program can market him. Sending stuff out to voters, that's useless now because with Twitter and everything.
No, you have free promotion every day of the week on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. It's instant stuff. So it's a different thing, and I'm sure EJ and the guys over at Pitt are trying to find ways to get his name out there.
Yeah, and they're putting tweets out there. You're seeing the stats. The stats are gaudy. He certainly had a very, very impressive year. I'm imagining that's only going to continue. And as we've been saying, and really as everyone's been saying, if Pitt wants respect as a team, if they want their guy to get a Heisman candidacy, all they got to do is keep playing the way they've been and win these very winnable games. The only thing I would offer as a little bit of pushback in terms of candidacy, I do feel like that if Pitt runs the table except for a close loss to Clemson, who keeps on winning despite their early season loss. That's still a very talented Clemson team, even if they maybe aren't a national title contender like they have been in recent years. Or say loses one other game to a solid ranked team. Pitt does not have exactly an incredibly easy schedule coming up, even though these are winnable games. I think if they have 2 losses and he has really amazing stats, he's not going to win, but he might still have a chance to be a candidate, because you mentioned Ware, who's a great example as well from years ago, but even more recent example would be Robert Griffin III. He won the Heisman Trophy as the winner with 3 losses. He was 9-3 at Baylor, and that was even before Baylor's basketball national title. That was not an elite program. They were behind Oklahoma, Texas. You could even have argued West Virginia and several others around that area, and into what the Big 12 is now, even though that was before WVU was in then. But he won at 9-3. And had some bad losses there. His stats took him there. They promoted him. He was an individual. He eventually became one of those draft picks in the NFL that the Washington football team had to trade up for. Obviously, his career didn't pan out. But that's more maybe of a comparison. RG3 did have 9 losses. But again, if Kenny Pickett keeps up with the numbers, though, Mike, if he ends up there, if they run the table, have 1 loss, and he has by far the best numbers, I don't think he'll win either. But there are going to be some Pitt fans that are going to be really mad and feel like he should have won the award. But even him being a candidate would be a great feather for Mark Whipple. That'd be great for Pat Narduzzi in the program. They would be able to put on their resume, Mark Whipple would be the number 1 guy, I really think, who's taking a lot of criticism. He could be able to say, I coordinated a Heisman candidate. It doesn't matter if he wins. That's a major thing to put on that resume, no matter where he goes, a guaranteed job. So if they want more respect, though, as a team and for Kenny Pickett, all they need to do
it all starts Saturday. Yeah. I'll start Saturday, Mike, and I'll say this, and I know we're going to move on to West Virginia here, but this game is, I think if Pitt wins this game, I think they win the Coastal. I do, because if you look at the way things break out, you have a bunch of teams. You have Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Virginia, Duke, with already having 2 or 3 losses in the conference, and Pitt doesn't have any. So, and then if you beat Virginia, Tech's going to be the front runner because they have a little bit of an easier schedule down the stretch. However, if you beat them, then theoretically you have a 2-game lead over them as far as if it comes down to head-to-head. Right. So this is such a huge game for Pitt. They win this game, momentum will be going. They got Clemson coming in next week, probably national. It's just a huge, huge, huge game for them. If they win, I think they play in the Coastal. I keep saying the Coastal. I think they win the Coastal when they play in the ACC championship.
Right. And this is a year that, unlike when they were there years ago, they would have a legit chance of winning the conference, because this is a very vulnerable Clemson team, a very vulnerable conference. There's no behemoth like there was at that point, because I think everybody at that point knew, Mike, okay, you win the Coastal, but there's a 0% chance of beating Clemson, who was just a powerhouse stomping everyone.
Right now, Wake's
Wake.
They're ahead of Clemson, so we'll see if that where's that at? They're 4-0.
Clemson's lost in conference. They lost to North Carolina State. Now, I don't think anyone thinks too much of Wake, but they're leading right now. But if Pitt could get a ACC championship game against Wake Forest, that's not even a program to the stature of Pitt, you could argue. So that would be right for the taking of Pitt. And then, of course, the end of the year, all that. If everything unfolds that we're saying, I'm sure there's going to be some Pitt fan that's going to say, but if you just beat Western Michigan, you could have had an outside playoff chance. So there's always something, but Pitt has it all.
They'll be in a New Year's Day.
They would definitely be.
New Year's Day bowl. Regardless of what happened, if Pickett ran the table, they still wouldn't have been in the
right.
They still would have been in the top 4. But I don't want to start talking about that already. But this game is huge.
Oh yeah. Absolutely, to say the very, very least. Just quickly for a team that doesn't have as much in front of them in terms of bowl games this year, and really would need to do a lot to even get in any bowl game at all, and that's the West Virginia Mountaineers. They're sitting at 2-4. Mike, you and I'll admit, much more was going to happen this year. We're a bit higher on this team in terms of wins. I thought 7 would be a minimum. Last year they won a bowl game, despite the weird COVID year where they didn't know they were going to play games every single week. They dealt with COVID a lot and were able to get in we're getting a bowl game and get a pretty solid win over Army. Not a major one, but still a bowl game. They're going into a bye now. Is there a chance for West Virginia to get in a bowl game this year? How bad is it that this is now going from a climb to feeling like a plummet, and they're having a worse year than the year earlier? Because even though they have that relationship and that trust with Neil Brown from the program on down, you saw it, Mike. We covered it at WV Sports Now. The former players are now attacking Neil Brown on Twitter, and that was never something people thought would occur. He's been loved since he got to Morgantown, but that love seems like it is gone. And his decision at quarterback could be a lot of that. But this team is going nowhere fast, and the climb was supposed to be happening quicker.
This is tough. This is going to be a test for Neil Brown. He talked about it at his press conference about how he called, groups of players, and they talked about the remaining season and the goals. But it's also going to be a test, I think, for Shane Lyons too, in staying the course. If this is his guy, it has to be his guy. It can't be.
It is his guy.
Yeah. I know it's so he, as a university, as an athletic department, they're just going to have to try to back. Obviously, they thought that they would be a little bit of ahead. Yeah. The only and I'm not even going to use this as consolation, but they expected more wins by now, but 3 of the losses are by single digits. So it's not as though I'd feel a lot worse.
Right.
If they were going out, and getting boat raced, but they're not, and legitimately they probably should have won 2 of those games.
Yeah.
But they didn't. However, if Neil Brown's your guy, there's no thought the fans should back him. I know it's hard to do. They want a winner. West Virginia is a great college town. They expect their teams to win. However, sometimes things take longer than you expect. And I wouldn't be all over Neil Brown yet. The only thing I'm surprised about, we were talking about this last night. I'm just a little surprised at. I expected this offense by year 3, regardless of what personnel he had. He had the offensive reputation.
That's what we hit on in the postgame show. Absolutely. Yeah. Greg Carey, who I had on a Metro News, he brought this up. Neil Brown was supposed to be an offensive genius, and you could bring up their 8-15 against FBS competition, non-FCS and Kansas. So, for example, 8-15 versus teams that are in the FBS who aren't Kansas, and then of course LIU, etc. 8-15. That's just bad no matter how you slice it. But of course the cover was bare. Last year was a bowl game. Maybe last year was fool's gold. Maybe they did better than they should have done last year, which is why this year feels so bad. But only 30 plus points against non-FCS teams twice in 3 years. So that's not including LIU and those teams. And he was said to be a offensive genius, especially for his age. That's not happening. And there's talent there. Letty Brown's having a horrible year. There's talent. There's receiver talent.
Especially, and the other thing is, everyone knows the Big 12's reputation as far as not being very great defensively.
Right.
And you couple that with, that's the only thing that's just surprised me a little bit is, 1 year, 2 years, you got to get your players in. But by year 3, you're having your player. You should be having some of your players in to not be putting up points like you need to do in order to win big in college football. That's the only thing. It's not surprising me that they haven't won. The Big 12 isn't an awful football. It's not as though you should be going in there and dominating. However, I'm surprised at how boring the offense has been under him.
Yeah, I think it's really bad. The offense hasn't done enough. I hate to pile on again. You absolutely could argue that Jared Deggy's regression is part of that. He has not been getting better as the years go by. You could argue he is worse now than last year. Again, we don't know if Garrett Green can throw the football with any accuracy because he has not been given that opportunity. I do think now having 2 weeks to prepare, if West Virginia's offense starts sluggish again and cannot move the ball, I don't care if they lose by 70 and he throws 6 interceptions. You got to see what you have in Garrett Green and let him throw a ball, meaning a ball that goes beyond 5 yards. So if I got to get literal here because he's giving them passes, but they're just not going anywhere. He needs a 5-yard pass that is called as a play, not that he just does it because there's nothing else there and it's a 3-yard dumper. If you give that to Green, even if he's not the starter, give him more of that. Let's see if that's there. That would help the future of the program. I don't think wins and losses matter anymore for this year. Yeah, these games are close. They could have won some more than they did. Maryland's turnovers, Oklahoma off a field goal, Texas Tech off a field goal, and they were started slow in the first half. I think the Baylor loss is just really why this is a conversation, Mike, as we close up the show. They didn't just lose like the earlier weeks or even Texas Tech. They lost close after starting slow in the first half. But Jared Degg and Neil Brown, we have the videos on PSL. They came out there after Texas Tech and said, we apologize. We weren't ready. Won't happen again. It happened again just a few days later, and they lost 45-20, where the defense, which they have been hanging their hat on for years, the defense was number 1 in the country the first half of the year. Last year, it is a solid defense. They really played well against Oklahoma, and you see that nobody else is holding Oklahoma to a low amount of points, even if they almost beat them. And the defense was just god-awful. Jared Degg couldn't move the ball. It felt like the team quit on the season a little bit. And I don't want to put that on college kids, but if that's their best effort, then they're not a good team. So you got to imagine the climb moves. But
I was surprised that watching the game, I was surprised that the Baylor receivers, that quarterback wasn't having to make any good throws. Those guys
they're wide open. Wide open. Wide open. And Mike, I looked at the stats too for anyone who's not followed Baylor. His 300-plus performance in that game against West Virginia, and that's a solid WVU defense last 2 years. That is the first time Bohannon has thrown over 300 yards against anyone all year.
Yeah.
All year. And that's off 18 completions. Yeah, again, that's what I'm saying. We know the talent there in those kids. Some of them we know from recruiting, and they're better than that. That is one of the worst offensive performances of the whole season. So I hope they're motivated by the fans, media, and players and former players. Maybe they need some motivation, and maybe that's kind of good in a way because Neil Brown has felt all love. It's been all love about the program, trusting the climb. You're not just going to blindly trust it and say, okay, we're just never going to win and it'll be year 5 and we're trusting the climb. There does have to be an expiration date on the climb, fair or unfair. He brings up Rich Rodriguez and Don Nalen all the time when he first got the job of give him time. We know this isn't fair. He will not be given the time that Don Nalen or Rich Rodriguez got. It just won't happen. This is 2021. This is not 1981, 1991, or 2001. He won't get that time. If they end up only winning 3 or 4 games this year and then miss a bowl game next year, I would think that would be it. He's not going to get fired by any means. They do trust him now, but his seat is not hot, but they're turning up the dial a little bit. He needs to end this season strong. That'll do it for this edition of the show. From one program that's on the rise that is really turning things around to have potentially a special year in Pitt to West Virginia that maybe thought they'd be further ahead, but I don't know where the program currently is and if they are trusting that climb or not. A climb does mean up. You cannot fall if you are climbing. That'll do it for this edition of the show. Keep it here. Yeah, it's not the decline by any means. Keep it here on PSL, PSN, all throughout.